Have you ever noticed that some people speak in a meeting and immediately sound credible, clear, and ready for more responsibility? And others, who may be just as smart and just as capable, sound less focused, less confident, or simply harder to follow? That difference is often not about intelligence. It's not even mainly about confidence. More often, it comes down to communication habits. And that matters because in visible business moments, people are not only evaluating the content of what you say, they're also evaluating your judgment, your clarity, and your readiness. So, what makes a leader sound executive ready? In my experience, there are 5 habits that matter most. First, they lead with the point. Leaders who sound executive ready don't make people wait to figure out why they're talking. They don't start with a long runway of background, context, and history. They orient the listener quickly. They may say something like, "I have a recommendation. There are 2 risks you should know. The key issue is timing." Or, "I need a decision on one point today." That kind of opening does 2 things. First, it shows respect for the listener's time. Second, it makes the message easier to follow. A lot of people think they need to earn the right to get to the point. In reality, in most senior-facing situations, getting to the point is what earns credibility. Second, they frame before they detail. Executive-ready communicators don't simply pour information into the room. They help listeners understand what kind of message this is and how to process it. For example, this is primarily a recommendation. I'm going to give you a brief update and then one decision point. This is less a performance issue and more a resourcing issue. Or, there are 3 things that matter here, but I want to focus on one. That framing helps people know what to listen for. Without framing, even strong content can feel messy. With framing, the same content feels more organized, more thoughtful, and more useful. This is one of the biggest differences between simply reporting information and leading communication. Third, they focus on what matters. One of the clearest signs that someone is not yet communicating at a more senior level is that they try to say everything. They include every detail, every nuance, every caveat, every piece of background. But executive-ready communicators understand that not every fact deserves airtime. They curate. They ask themselves, what is most relevant here? What does this audience actually need? What belongs in the main message and what belongs in backup detail? This is especially important for smart, conscientious people because they often believe that being thorough means being effective. And sometimes it does. But in visible leadership moments, relevance usually matters more than completeness. The goal is not to prove how much you know. The goal is to help people understand what matters. Fourth, they show judgment. This is where leadership voice really starts to emerge. Less experienced communicators often stop at information. They report what happened. They list the data. They summarize the inputs. But executive-ready communicators go one step further. They interpret. They help people understand what the information means. They say things like, the single-month dip is less important than the longer-term trend. The bigger concern is not the delay itself, but the effect on client confidence. Of the 3 options, this is the least disruptive. Or, the issue is not effort, the issue is prioritization. That kind of interpretation signals judgment. And judgment is one of the main things leaders listen for when they're trying to decide whether someone is ready for broader responsibility. Fifth, they make the path forward clear. Strong communication usually creates movement. It clarifies what should happen next. So executive-ready communicators rarely end in a fog of information. They end with direction. And that direction might sound like, my recommendation is, or what I need today is, the next step is, the decision point here is, what I'm asking for is, and go on. Even when the answer is uncertain, they help define the next move. That gives the communication value, because in business settings, clarity is useful only if it helps people act, decide, or align. So let's pull this together. What makes a leader sound executive ready? Not bigger words, not a more polished personality, not sounding formal or overly rehearsed. It's the ability to communicate with clarity, relevance, judgment, and direction. Leaders who sound executive ready tend to do 5 things well. They lead with the point, they frame before they detail, they focus on what matters, they show judgment, and they make the path forward clear. The good news is that none of this is a personality trait. These are habits, and habits can be developed. That's one reason this topic matters so much for emerging leaders, high potentials, and technical experts who are moving into more visible roles. Very often, the issue is not that they're not ready to contribute. It's that they've not yet learned how to sound ready in the moments that shape perception. And that's a skill. If this topic is relevant to you or your organization, I've also created a short executive brief on what makes a leader sound executive ready. And I'll be hosting a webinar where I'll go deeper on this topic. You'll find the details below.